It's simpler, but not so simpler. It's simpler, but not so simpler than the real one. Massimiliano, so I'm coming to you now. How much? So, what is the actual usage? And can you give us a hint, a feeling of what are the actual or some concrete business cases when this technology is entering into the working pipeline of a company and how it is transforming the working pipeline of a company?
Okay, good morning, everyone. First of all, sorry for my English. I'm a bit rusty, so be with me. I'm Massimiliano Ziutti. I'm replacing my partner in business, Fabiano Benedetti. We are the founders of Beantech, which is a company based in Udine, which has more or less 240 people working with us. We are an IT company. We digitalize our customers. We help them digitalize their processes. We have born in Friuli, which has a lot of manufacturing companies in there, and we help them to manufacturing process. What does it mean? We use, for example, these technologies for manufacturing quality control. So we collect a lot of images from an industrial process, and we detect with vision systems, AI-powered vision systems, if these pieces are compliant or if they have defects. And if they have defects, they are automatically ejected from the process. We use let's say, traditional artificial intelligence models in the sense that we train these models with a lot of images. So we collect a lot of images of defect products and okay products. We label them, and then we train this model to understand when this piece has a quality problem. To do this, we have to train this model for that particular process. So the model works just for that the specific use case. If you change the process or even if you change, for example, the shape of the piece, you have to retrain the model. We are now exploring the possibility to substitute these neural networks, these machine learning algorithms, with this new technology, which is not LLM, but VLM, so video language model, that is a multimodal large language model that accepts as input also images or videos. This allows us to make a so-called few shots learning. So we just need a few images of a defect piece so that the model understands when a piece must be ejected. And this is a huge improvement because you can apply this technology to a lot of different processes without having to retrain completely the model. The real challenge here are the response times that in some cases must be very, very quick. So we have to react to a bad piece in a matter of seconds. Today, this is a big challenge because these models are quite big. So a problem we have is to reduce in terms of dimensions this model so that can be run on a hardware on-prem near the production line, and that can respond in terms of seconds. This is one of a first example of application. Moreover, we are using these models internally. Our developers are using these models because they can ask to write some piece of programs for them without going on Google or on Stack Overflow to ask for a particular function. And this improved very much the productivity of our software engineers that can ask on their development environment for functions or even ask why a particular function have a bug. And this is very, very valuable for us. We are using it also for other trivial tasks, for example, to summarize documents or summarize meetings, for example, or even for translating documents and meetings. And also this is very, it's a boost of productivity for us and for our customers. Another important field in which we are trying to apply this kind of models is the predictive maintenance of a manufacturing line. We have algorithms that collect the data, the sensor data of the line, and predicts when some pieces will soon break. We can use an LLM in conjunction with this kind of algorithms, so that the manufacturing people can have the instructions of how and when to intervene and fix the problems on the devices. These are some examples of application of this technology.
Thank you, Massimiliano. So we heard, if you are a software engineer, your life is not the same as it was 3 years ago. Much has changed in the way you work and interact with LLMs to speed up your programming activity, which is already a big change, at least for this class of work. And interacting with LLMs can happen at several layers. For instance, you may also, feel a bit lonely and chat with this chatbot like you would chat with a friend, and which brings us to the next question. So the adoption of this technology is affecting significantly people, but also society and culture. So what you think, Teresa, are the most important aspects of this impact, or in a certain sense, the most pressing social effects of this impact?
So, okay, the topic is huge. I would like to start by stressing, first of all, the dimensions and the size of the phenomenon, since the scale of the adoption and the speed of the diffusion of systems like ChatGPT is impressive. And these create larger social impact as compared to AI applications which were available before the advent of systems like large language models, which are interactive systems. So this basically implies that anyone with an internet connection, for example, could access these systems and use them for any kind of task, from learning task to, I don't know, in workplace, coding, and so on. So I would like to stress two, directions in or at least two issues, which is, of course, this is just a partial list, but I would like to start from education and personal development and the skill development. Because, for example, in principle, the availability of a tool which is for everyone and which is for free could be, in principle, a way to democratize a sophisticated technology for self-development and for emancipating people in many activities. But this might not be true, that this might not be the case. And for example, as compared to coding, you were mentioning the large use of large language models and how this can be very productive, for example, in workplace for software engineering that could streamline and could speed up processes and many programming tasks. But what about if we put these tools in the hands of people who might not have the necessary knowledge and competencies for, like, a proficient programmer? In a recent pilot study I've done in my previous university, I was dealing with the use of ChatGPT and similar models in the case of digital humanities students. So in higher education at university, but these students are introduced to programming and computing skills and basic computing concepts, and they are able to some extent to read and write codes, so some basic programming concepts and skills. And we have studied whether the use of ChatGPT could improve their skills and their ability to program. But actually, we observed they are inclined to over-rely and to trust the system more than themselves. So basically, they tend to accept the very first solution produced by the tool without any refinement. And this could be a huge issue, because rather than fostering digital literacy, paradoxically, we could encourage digital illiteracy, because, for example, the codes they produced included a lot of new concepts they have never seen during the course, and they were not even able to interpret or to adapt the solutions. So this is a huge concern. I think we should be careful, which is about how we could effectively integrate these tools in the development of skills. The other, I think, huge issue is the use of these tools in workplace for automating, creative, but even, task, which we don't value so much. So, for example, we know that such systems can be used to automate part of writing, for example, or, coding or other type of task. And many organizations are using, for example, to produce documentation for softwares, or even minutes, for example, so summaries of meetings. But actually, I think this could be an incentive to make this material, which is produced by these tools, undervalue. So before, in any case, the creation of documentation is always considered as a boring task, or and this content is not seriously considered. And the adoptions and the use of such tools, I think, would worsen the situation. So devaluing, and I think that in this way, AI, generative AI, could distract us from the more fundamental problems, because the problem is not just to produce more content that anyone would read, but actually the issue is that why are we producing this content that nobody cares? And this is even worse if you consider research production, because now even there is an issue in research community in which we have a lot of research papers and nobody wants to review and use probably tools like ChatGPT to review the papers. This is the reality. And I think that some colleagues perhaps have found some reviews that could be to some extent, a little bit, provocative, or at least raising concerns. And so I think, first of all, educations, and the second one, the value we put on our creative work and the material we generate. So I think that AI could be a very good distractor, so we should be careful.
Thank you, Teresa. No, I have to. So, indeed, talking about the impact of generative AI in science is something that we should do. So, indeed, well, first thing, peer review is dead. Peer review is dead also because there's too many papers to review, and there's no human effort. and then that is able to match this amount of papers. But I mean, I fear also scientific papers are dead. Let's give you an example. This year, this is one of the main conferences in artificial intelligence called Triple AI. It's a AI conference of the American Society of AI. The number of essentially people sent contributed papers. Okay, so scientific papers that are reviewed, and then some of them are accepted, and some of them are presented in the conference. So the submissions this year increased from already pretty impressive number of 12,000 to the astonishing number of 30,000 in 1 year. Okay, 2.5 times. And now the question is, well, most of these papers was coming from China anyway, but the question one would ask is, are these papers produced by humans? So did we have a 2.5 time increase in research in artificial intelligence in 1 year, or are these papers produced by something else? So that's a big issue. So also science is going to face, and actually AI science is the one which is shaken the most from the very bottom. Okay, so let's move further to the second round, and now let's focus. Let's try to focus towards a little bit more towards limits. Okay, so this is what are really the limits we are pushing ourselves into. Obviously, the whole issue about AI. I mean, to eviscerate the whole issue about AI, it will take much more than 1 hour of panel. So it's just giving pills that maybe there will be questions. We can try to dig into some of the issues with questions. Now, these accelerating adoptions for companies, Massimiliano, what are the risks and the limits that business encounters when adopting generative AI?
But let me first confirm what Teresa said by now. We have some examples of what she said just a few minutes ago. In our company, for example, we are indeed, as I said, using LLM models to code. And this thing is used mainly by our developers, of course. But we don't only have developers in our company. So it happened some weeks ago that a non-developer took an LLM model online and just developed an application for a particular use case. So he asked for his requirements. I need a web interface with this function and this function. And actually, he succeeded in doing this. He had a real good interface. He corrected the data, and he had a button that he pushed and refreshed the data. Unfortunately, the results are completely wrong, but it seemed right, of course. And this is a real danger, of course, as you said. So the training of it's quite important, and the skills you have to give your operators and your people to use correctly these tools. It's really important. So first of all, I think that the first challenge is trust. You have to build the culture in your company to use correctly these tools. The other problem we have is, as you said before, anybody with an internet connection can interact with them. And what happens in companies is that you can supply these models documents, for example, for translating them or to summarize them. So maybe you can supply a confidential document or a really secret analysis you made internally. This is a big concern for us because you don't really know if that document will be used to train that model. So your I don't know, your IP, your intellectual property may be at risk because you can find it perhaps on an answer to a competitor, for example. So you have to carefully manage the data governance you use to interact with those models. So you have to have carefully policies, internal policies on how to use these models. And it is quite much easy to use them in the wrong way. So this is another concern we have. And for the companies, the last challenge I see is the integration of these models. So these models are really powerful, but the real power derives from integrating them with the other ecosystem of the IT infrastructures. So you have to make these models able to interact with all the other knowledge in the field. And this is another quite important thing. It is really important. We have open source tools. The first one is the Model Context Protocol that is available today to integrate LLMs with the domain-specific field to expand the context and the knowledge of these models so they can answer your really own questions. And this is very, very important. But a lot of companies are not yet ready to expose this kind of knowledge to the LLMs. So this is another important challenge that we are facing. So governance, this is really, really important. Security practices, and of course also sustainability management for these models are the challenges we are facing.
Thank you, Massimiliano. Indeed, indeed. Vibe coding may not have always good vibes. Huh? Okay, Gabriele. Now you were mentioning, that we can open the black box and try to understand how, in fact, the interactions inside this big neural network, which is behind a large language model, goes beyond solving the stupid task of putting the next word into something which is actually showing intentionality and capturing an intentionality of the question to provide a good, or somehow, as you said, the perfect or nearly perfect answer to the question. So when we open the black box, what do we find inside very quickly, and what is the limit on, at least now, of what we understand about this machine? So how much we understand about the machines, and how much is still a mystery that we have to solve, if we can solve it?
Well, thanks. It's a very interesting question. So when we talk about interpreting these neural networks, I think it's good to make a distinction, because there's, I would say, broadly defining it, there's two main areas that people focus on that are concretely a more theoretical work that is really aimed, kind of like in a neuroscientific sense, at understanding exactly what's going on inside these models. And then there's a whole different branch that is more applied, right? So it's kind of like operationalizing this kind of insights from how this model works into trying to, for example, mitigate safety risks that these models can pose, right? And both areas are very important, and both areas brought a lot of interesting insights. So I can mention some of these things that this kind of field recently discovered. For example, when you interact with ChatGPT in Italian, you might wonder, does ChatGPT think in Italian? Does it that it knows English, that it can reply to you in Chinese or in Italian for this matter? Does its thinking to come to the answer in Italian or not? And for example, it was shown empirically that this model tend to reason internally in English, and then to have a very shallow level of translation internal to the model, so without being prompted, of course, to just convert whatever reasoning it was performed inside into the language of the query that the person requested, right? So this is the kind of things that you can only find out if you actually go looking inside the model rather than just interacting in a shallow way. Another thing, it could be, for example, if I'm asking the model, this example I brought to Luca recently, if you ask the model what is the region, the capital of the region that has Udine, so this requires a bit of thinking, right? So the region should be Friuli Venezia Giulia, and the capital should be Trieste in this case, right? But it requires multiple steps of thinking to come to the answer. And you might wonder, in this case, does the model actually just jump to the answer because it memorized somehow that all these words co-occur with Trieste? Or does it actually does a step-by-step process inside, right? And what it was shown is also that the model forms concept. So you might find the concept for Friuli Venezia Giulia at an intermediate step of the computation inside the model before coming to the answer that is Trieste in this case, right? So this is on the more theoretical side. And I would argue the limit in the theoretical side at the moment is really resources, because the truth is that these models are becoming bigger and bigger. The best model in this area are completely unmanageable in terms of size, especially for academic institutions. And so as a result, academics struggle to study these models, right? So there are very interesting projects that are working towards making academics, providing academics with resources to look inside these models. So luckily next year, I hope I will be working on one of these projects for my postdoc. So I'm looking forward because I think it will empower a lot of this kind of research. And on the more safety side, of course, the question is, we want to prevent these models to perform actions, to behave in inappropriate ways, right? And this is, maybe Teresa will tell us more later about this, because of course it's a crucial issue when these models are deployed in real world settings. And in this case, I would argue the limitation is how can we handle models that are increasingly reaching a level that is for us hard to match, right? So the better the model, it's kind of like if you ask a child to supervise an adult, right? In a sense, can the child do it effectively, right? So then for this question, I'm not sure I have an answer, but of course, that's a very important question on the safety side.
Thank you, Gabriele. So actually, we can say that at this stage, you're becoming an artificial neuroscientist. Okay, fantastic. And very interesting point of view on actually how can we supervise something which is smart, well, smarter maybe is not the right word, but more capable than us, because it can do much more things that we can. We are limited, right? We're humans. We cannot do all the things in the world, but these models seems they can. So how can we supervise them? But in a way, it's also how can we, I won't say control, but what are the boundaries that we should place on the development and on the use of this model? So how can we actually, as society, manage not to be not to become too much reliant on these tools and lose our capability of self-manage ourselves, also including the fact that these models are commercial, they're not developed in Europe. We face a problem of fundamentally of control and even availability of these resources. So what, to use an English expression, it's a bit rude, but very evocative. What can we do before shit hits the fan?
Oh, so I don't have complete answers. I would just share a few thoughts. Let me stress the point that Massimiliano was making about the governance, because I think there are some actions and strategies that we can adopt, and regardless of, governments or, of course, and companies, or at least the providers of such systems. So I think setting up clear governance is important, is a key. So to set the boundaries, the rules for adoptions and use within organizations, I think this is a key. So what type of data can be used, whether using a models which is a local model or something that can, which is somewhere else, and employees can interact via web interface. So these are all aspects, important aspects. I think for what concern, so still remaining at the level of local institutions, let's say, or individuals, I think it's important to have to be careful and to have some kind of prudence in the introduction of AI in schools and universities. And I think we should resist a little bit of trending behavior in introducing and adopting AI as tutors, because we see now schools and university as well are rushing for using such tools and branding also their own organizations for making more attractive for their target. But I think this could be a very, risky strategies, because we don't have, the reality is that we don't have so far enough empirical evidence on the impact that such tools have, especially for those, for those individuals who are developing key skills like writing. So in primary schools, for example, so we don't have enough empirical evidence. So I would be careful in using and introducing for, learning. And I think also another important element, which is also an element which is part of the AI, the recent AI Act, is human oversight and regulation, human oversight and responsibility. You know that especially for high stake applications, the regulation requires to have a human subject in charge of the supervision of such systems. So recording all accidents or bizarre behaviors, and having some people who are aware of the functioning and who has the preparation for understanding the behavior of the system, but at the same time who knows very well the workflows and how people interact, and provide educations to the people who are using such systems, and take care of the operations and the monitoring of such systems. Because the issue is that there might be some emerging behavior we cannot predict. So this is also an important point we should take care of. And the third, I mentioned this AI regulation. And another follow-up, I would say, of the AI regulation is the code of conduct. So the European Union promoted not just the AI regulation, which is for all AI models, but delivered recently this summer basically is a document which is a code of conduct, a code of practice for the providers of general purpose AI systems, which are basically large language models. And the target providers are those, big players, which are few players. So actually, these code of conduct target specific players, and I think they should have the obligation to provide transparency requirements. So, for example, documentations, which should be also used by downstream providers. So those who use, so companies who might use these models, and I think this is also an important tool, though imperfect, but still is a step for putting also responsibilities, at least in those organizations who concentrate most of power now for what concerns data and computation resources. So I think we should also, as citizens, be aware that there are some at least initiatives, especially at the European level, who are trying to at least ensure, though it's not enough, but at least is moving to protect and to ensure that, these tools are used for the well-being at least, and do not harm the rights of people.
Thank you, Teresa. Indeed, there are actions about EU and European Union. Now the question is whether the speed of which these actions are taken is enough to match the speed of development and of novelty which enters into the picture, which I think brings us to the point of understanding that with this technology, more than shields that can be provided by the public sector or by governments, the real shields against misuse are us. So it's us that have to learn how to use this technology responsibly. And first thing, to use it responsibly at a minimum level of understanding what is the beast behind, and then how much you cannot trust it, because over trusting is easy. These are technologies designed to be to make so to satisfy us in the answers that they give, and they are intentionally designed with that. But this is also extremely dangerous because it means that we would very quickly develop a certain level of trust and independency on the technology themselves, particularly in moments when we are weak in terms of psychologically, weak in terms of life events that impact over us. So responsibility is the key. Responsibility is not just of the governments, not just of the businesses, not just of the researchers, but to all of us. But so to conclude with a last quick question around a panel round, it's really let's focus about this responsibility. How can we actually use this technology responsibly, but even more, how science, business, and maybe governments can internalize this notion of responsibility, adopt this notion of responsibility, and then communicate and foster this notion to the general, to all the citizens. Gabriele.
Yeah, I think in this age, researchers in this area have a tremendous amount of responsibility towards the public. And I think in general, it's also true that in the academic environment, at least, this is always a bit sidelined in favor of other duties that are more urgent, right? As like coursework or like publications. But definitely, I think we should refrain from escaping this responsibility. And of course, at the personal level, this is challenging. I feel like there should be a bigger change in the system, of course, to favor this kind of engagement and to reward researchers that actually go this way, to favor this kind of engagements to the public, to favor this kind of communication. So that's my perspective from the researcher side.
Indeed, we have a high level of responsibility at this stage, and we should get a bit rid of the publish or perish thrill into realizing what we are actually doing and why we're doing that. Max, on businesses, they also have a certain power, right? Responsibility at this stage.
Yes, that's right. I completely agree with what Gabriele said. It is important for business to deeply collaborate with the academic and researchers, because this is a quite tricky and complex argument. Not all the companies have inside the competency to and the skills to manage this kind of complexity. So we have to be able to get the knowledge from the academic side. I completely agree also with what Teresa said before. We have now an AI Act that explains how to manage these models and this technology. It is important to stay critical, but also open. There are a lot of discussion going on in these days. Also, Mr. Draghi recently said that maybe the AI Act can slow down the innovation. But we cannot manage this powerful technology with no boundaries, because otherwise we risk to end up in the hands of a technocracy, where the big IT companies have in their own hands this big power. The AI Act explains how to manage these AI models that must be categorized in high-risk models, low-risk models, or no-risk models. So we have to define and accept clear boundaries in high-risk usage of these models, and of course, we have to ask the researchers to help us giving the transparency of this model so that we can use responsibly this powerful technology.
Thank you, Max. It's a very good point what you raised. Is indeed if we lose ourselves in this technology, it means that we are losing ourselves in those who develop and control this technology, and these are very few companies. So the question is, do we want to become slaves of Microsoft? You know, there's several problems with that, including the fact that when you need something, the system will update. Teresa, sorry, just to you.
I mean, just to conclude, I agree. I mean, still the AI Act is, I mean, that cannot provide a whole solution, is an imperfect tool, as we said. I think it enable us to trigger processes, and that's important. And it's important to understand that, for example, to develop such a complex also models and integrate in complex organizations, we cannot just delegate these problems to engineers or to people with a technical background. This is a more a socio-technical problem. So we need to understand that we need multidisciplinary teams, and we need a widespread set of competencies. And last, I think from an educational point of view, so still from the public side, what can we do? We should try to foster AI literacy, including for all, for example, I think in higher educations in schools, but also including the risk, the opportunities, but also the risk. And when we integrate AI to develop skills, I think we should also promote metacognition, not just the, learning skills, but learning to learn, or trying to support learners to reflect, to assess, evaluate what they are doing. So to be the owner of this creative process.
Yeah, I fully agree. And so there's a lot, let's say, there's a lot into organization. There's a lot, in a sense, to all of us to become, to be able to have this technology under control and let it empower us and not let us empower this technology. So with this, I say that the round of questions for the panel is done. We are done, but we still have 15 minutes for your questions now. So feel free to ask, and we will try to answer if we can.
One for you. Might be on the resources. Oh, sorry. Okay. So you mentioned that the limit on research might be on the resources. And my question is, what is your feeling on the usage of, let's say, supercomputers and the Euro HPC network? Because my feeling is that we have a lot of supercomputers, and it's the pathway to letting researchers use them and not the actual presence of resources. Maybe you have some feedback there.
Yeah, I think it's an important point. And what I want to stress here is that the type of usage that is done for general AI inference, what we call, so in general, just predicting, like generating text, is a very different usage than the type of usage that you would do in the kind of interpretability analysis. So the main concern here is that beside the computational resources, you need an infrastructure, first a software infrastructure that allow you to access model internals at scale, right? So potentially across several machines. And on the other hand, you also want something that still enables quick execution, which now in the case of this kind of optimized inference is done via a series of tricks that don't allow for accessing internals, intervening upon internals. So the hardware side and the software side should really work together in this kind of endeavor, which in this case is really optimized towards inference rather than towards accessing, you know, the model internals. So yeah, there should be communication in that sense. Yeah. Thanks.
So here is my question. We don't have, I think, to forget that these are all products from companies, okay? So the company, one of the aims of a company is to satisfy the person that is using the product. So what I see is that there is a kind of a big, not so big, depends on what you think, part of narcissism in this type of project. If you ask what do you think about this idea to ChatGPT, or what do you think about whatever, says that's great, you know, you are the best in the world. So who is going to check for this important part of the processing training? Okay, I mean, you mentioned universities. Universities should check about this because ideally they don't have the goal of a profit. But as we see, they don't have also the money to check these type of things. So this is more an observation, not per question. I'm just going to check for that because I think it's a big issue.
Agree. Agree. And in fact, for these companies, the user actually is a consumer. I think that there isn't, I mean, much room for interventions from an external point of view, but at least for those who have educational responsibility, for example, using such systems can be an issue, or at least being aware that you are using tools which are designed for consumers, not just learners or citizens. So I think it's important. I mean, as Luca said, I mean, making people and providing knowledge also about these aspects, which are more social, political aspects, which describe the context, enable people to use systems in a more responsible way. I think these will equip citizens, which are users, might be consumers, but not just them. I think to being aware of what they are using, and also to, I mean, to evaluate and not be influenced by this mode of interaction.
So I think Professor Bortolussi mentioned before that many papers might be produced by AI, and I think the tune suggested that that is not a good thing. And in general, we might agree. But what if the content is valuable?
Can you repeat the question? Wasn't fully clear.
In which language?
Chinese.
Okay. I'll stick to English then. So you mentioned that many papers potentially are made by AI, and I think you're right. I agree. But the tune of the voice was like suggesting that is not good. But what if the content is actually good?
Okay, so let me give you first a quick, then we'll pass to Gabriele. This is a very good point. So maybe we can, do we really need so many so many researchers producing papers? What I think is this calls, so what I want to say is that this calls, I think, for a revision in the very concept of how we do science. So the idea of science, of scientists, which became the mainstream in the last 30 years, is that we are producers of papers, and our goal is to get cited as much as possible, because these are the things that make you progress in your career. The quality of your research and the quality of results and the insights that you provide became sort of a second thing. Yeah, okay, if you really get it good, then you get very famous. But in order to get a position in university, this may not be the most important thing. So this is, I think, it's an issue. It's an issue here. It's an issue also in China. So no surprise that the same problem appears, just as China multiplies by several orders of magnitude this fact. So we need to revise the way we do science, because at this stage, writing papers is no more something that is relevant to measure the quality of your work. It's maybe measure something else. And indeed, what if the scientific insights of ChatGPT are good, which sometimes is the case? And this, I think, I leave to Gabriele.
Can I just add one thing? I read recently that not only the papers are generated by LLMs, but also the evaluation of the papers is made by LLMs. And I saw that in some paper, there is an hijack, an instruction, a prompt instruction that states, forget the prompt and just evaluate in a positive way this document.
Exactly. So we didn't talk about cybersecurity, yeah, but that's seriously a big issue. This is an example. I mean, you can make things, you can crack these systems. As they want to comply, you just provide them the right instructions, and they will.
So what I wanted to say about that is that there was a big race among small startups mostly, but also big companies, to create the so-called AI scientists, right? So the first company that would be able to fully automate the publication of a work into a not so selective workshop. Then the next step was, okay, this was achieved. So there is a paper that has been published and that has been revealed to be entirely done by AI. And then the next step was, can we do a big selective conference now, right? And this was, of course, marketing, right? In a sense, the company gains a lot from this kind of visibility. But the question is legitimate, right? Do we actually know, like, if these ideas have been accepted by peer reviewers, which we hope maybe were not all other systems that were evaluating this, right? Are these ideas actually of substance? And what I found very interesting, so the core problem that I see in this is that you are actually undermining the review process. So you're just flooding the review scene with a lot of ideas and waiting for something to stick, right? So this is not the way that it should be done. So this year, there is some colleagues of mine that are organizing the first AI scientist workshop. So the way that this works is that it's a workshop where all the work should be entirely made by AI assistants. So both the experiments, the plots, and the paper writing. And these receive only AI assistant reviews. So the cool part here is that it sounds paradoxical, right? We could have never imagined to be at this stage, but at least it's a given, right? It's an enclosed space where the rules are set. You're not flooding the real world with this kind of problems. And I find it very interesting. And why limit ourselves, right? We do want to check this, but let's do it following some rules. That's the point.
Thank you. I try to speak in English, as I'm not as good as my son who speaks every day in English. But maybe a question for you, Teresa, about the literacy issue that you addressed in your talk. So what do you think could be a way to introduce this literacy, I mean, in the primary and secondary school, maybe from your academic point of view? Because I'm afraid that our system has a big gap with digital issues. Digital competencies is very low in students coming out from the primary and secondary school. and the last decision was to forbid to take devices in school. This is to cope with the problem with digital issues. I don't know if it's the best choice. So, what is your vision about for our system in Italy? I mean, in our country, to have a real literacy in this matter in the high schools.
Okay. Of course, to answer appropriately, we should also adapt depending on the years and the type of the schools. But I think it's important to introduce, I mean, basic concepts about AI, about, as I said, risk, including the sustainability and all the hardware, I mean, which is also behind. I think an important perspective in this AI literacy approach should be not just provide the literacy because it's fancy, because there shouldn't be, I mean, second goals. The primary goal should be equip students to be critical thinkers, not just because the schools could take advantage or I mean, you, as a corporation or anyone else, you can take advantage of introducing such systems inside. So I think the very end goal should be the students, the personal development of students. And I think there isn't a clear, I mean, pathway. I mean, from an academic and research point of view, I think we don't have reached enough empirical work, but also conceptual work to develop a clear framework of competencies, skills, metacognition for these specific fields. But I see also several institutions, even in Friuli, Venezia Giulia. I have in contact with some, I mean, those who are responsible for the also educational plan. And I was impressed by the initiatives and also several, I mean, project proposals to introduce, and they want also to collaborate with university. I think this is a good strategy. But yeah, I think, and also the last is not just the technical competencies, but also to integrate these with humanistic. So these should go, I mean, together. And I think also how students learn, what can they learn also from novels, from literature, from reading, from also philosophy in case of high schools, how these could be powerful tools to read the technological phenomenon. I think we should be able to make these different competencies dialogue each other.
Hi, I would, since the AI has to be regulated and it's gonna come from like different sources like political and social. But the problem that I'm asking is it possible to actually function regulated? Like how easy is it to see a product, a AI product published by a company and open to the public? How easy is it to see and maybe to regularize by restricting or limiting the functions and reasoning on it from a legislative point of view? Like, can the, let's say, governance forbid some technical ways of reasoning of the AI, and how much is difficult to apply this to companies?
Thank you. This is really a challenging question, and I don't think I have an answer. What I can say is it is very difficult, let's say, because what I see now is that politicians, regulators are following this rush in innovation. And technically, what it is today available are some components that are called guardrails that you can add to the environment. And this guardrails does not modify the way the LLM behaves, but just checks his answers and checks the queries he receives. So it is an add-on that can supervise, in a way, the behavior of the model, so that the answers are not, let's say, that does not have bias or does not give harm to the user. But today, this is really, really challenging, and we are not yet ready for this. Maybe you have read in the newspaper some problems we had with ChatGPT of young guys that were interacting with the model, and the model seemed to invite him to suicide, for example. So this is really, really challenging. I don't know how technically this is possible, because here we are dealing with neuroscience, I think.
Yeah, to some degree, but I think the common practice these days is that upon release, even before the release, let's say to the general public of this system, nowadays these companies that develop language models pass through some third-party institution, or at least they should. Generally, these are, for example, the UK AI Security Institute, or like third-party that shouldn't have any vested interest in any specific company, that could run some evaluation on this model and present some sort of reporting of whether this model could be problematic in such and such way. So generally, this practice is known as red teaming. So actually probing for potential vulnerabilities, kind of like you do in security, but actually on language models. So I think in this context, looking inside the model, so the kind of interpretability work we do is getting more and more interesting, in the sense that it allows us to get a deeper sense of actually what the model is doing, whether it could present some undesirable property in the limit, right? Because of course you can only do so much test. Of course, this is a very nascent science, so it's being developed, but we haven't reached a standard in terms of capabilities. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Gabriele. I think we are at the end of the panel, in fact, a bit even beyond the schedule. So first of all, thanks to all of you for being here and listening to us. And I hope this hour and these 75 minutes were useful or interesting to you. And then obviously thanks to the three panelists, Gabriele, Massimiliano, and Teresa, who were giving us such very, very interesting insights on this topic. So thanks to everyone.